Right, so today I want to talk about something that I've brought up before, but I've never made a specific video on it, and that's the Dunning Kruger effect. Now, basically, from Wikipedia, again, which isn't the most reliable source, but it's the first thing that came up, so that's what I'm going to use. Um, but anyway, they describe it as the Dunning Kruger effect is a cognitive bias in which people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. It is related to the cognitive bias of illusory superiority and comes from the inability of people to recognize their lack of ability. Without the self awareness of metacognition, people cannot objectively evaluate their competence or incompetence. As described by social psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger, the bias results from an internal illusion in people of low ability from an external misperception in their people of high ability, that is, the miscalibration of the incompetent stems from error about the self, whereas the miscalibration of the highly competent stems from an error about others. Now, basically, how it would look is that if you're asking people, is that when you start from the people that have the least knowledge of a topic to the people that have the most, it's basically like a U, kind of a U shape, more of a hollowed out U shape in that, or kind of like a half circle, whatever you want to call it, in that the people that know the least will think that they know pretty much the same as the people who know the most. In that, like I say, the people that know the least, like I say, if you're drawing it out on a line, it'll be the people that know the least think they know a lot, and then the people that know, average, they're actually the ones that rate themselves to be the least knowledgeable, even though they're about average. And then obviously the experts tend to rate themselves as experts or close to it. But the big problem is that the people who know the least think that they know pretty much the same or very close to the experts. And how this is tied into politics is, I mean, in a lot of ways, in that you have people who really have no idea whatsoever about topics that have just as much power and sway, to sway political decisions, to, I mean, to vote, to do all this kind of stuff, as people who know infinite amounts more than them. And that's just one of the many reasons why democracy is a terrible system, terrible system. And again, I'm not advocating we go towards, oh, you want to go towards some authoritarian dictatorship where you're in charge. No, I want to go towards a system where, no one is in charge. Again, it just people who throw out that accusation, it just goes to show that, I mean, they're perfect examples of this and that. I advocate for a system where it's basically, more of an anarchist or minarchist system, and where it would be literally impossible to have massive amounts of power over people because there's no government, so you can't do it there. There's no corporations, so you can't do it there. Again, so people who throw out that accusation just goes to show just how little they know. I just wanted to point that out. But like I said, the realm of politics is you have people who literally know nothing, who have just as much sway as people who know way more. Now, I'm not saying that every decision should be made by experts. Like, I mean, some people suggest we get rid of voting and we do that. The problem is the solution is we get rid of democracy altogether, and you have a true free market. Now, again, is that ever going to happen? Probably not, because the problem is that in democracy, the mob rule is basically another, a synonym for democracy. The problem is that the needs of the many will always outweigh the needs of the few, even if the needs of the few is the right needs, or the proper, the more ethical needs. And that's the problem with democracy, is that anything that happens under a democracy you have to support. And that's the problem, is that if 51% of people voted to bring back slavery, you can't really claim to have a problem with slavery if you're defending the current system. So I mean, it's agree with me and think, hey, we at the very least need to have a minarchist system, or support a big government system which inevitably leads to authoritarian, totalitarian kind of things. Now, maybe that's not slavery, but maybe it's 90% marginal tax rates on the top 10% of people. Maybe it's we're going to surveil, track, trace, database everything you do. So again, that's the problem. And the reason why all that kind of stuff happens is because the bottom, I don't know, pretty large percent of the population is so ignorant and so incompetent when it comes to their ability to rationally and um, competently make decisions on some of these important political topics. They're so bad and so unintelligent and dumbed down that the government can convince them to do pretty much anything as long as they promise them, security and free stuff. And again, that's the problem with this kind of stuff. So again, the study was done in 1999, at least the original study, and there's been other ones, this one in 2003, all that kind of stuff. Now, the other thing too is that I don't claim to be an expert on pretty much every topic I talk about. I always say that there's a lot of people that know a heck of a lot more than me. But I also recognize especially in day-to-day conversations, I recognize this is that the average person is literally like insanely incompetent and not educated. I don't like using the term educated because the left likes using that term, but for lack of a better word, educated on this kind of stuff. And it really bothers me that people like that have the same um, political power as someone who knows literally like hundreds of times more than them, regardless of what side they're on. And like I say, that's something that really bothers me. But again, the main reason why the Dunning Kruger effect is so important is, like they say, the Dunning Kruger effect. I mean, it exists in every aspect of society, but specifically in politics, because politics is something like we're not taught about this kind of. We're not taught about economics in school. We're not taught about finance in school. We're not taught about we're taught about some history, but a lot of the most important historical events and things that went on aren't taught, or they're taught in a way that's clearly biased. In that, I mean, a clear example of that is we're taught, we have it drilled into our head how bad the Nazis were. And again, I don't think the Nazis were good in any way, shape, or form. Like not in any way, shape, or form. So, again, people try and twist my words no matter what I say, but we're taught about how bad the Nazis are. It's drilled into your head for year after year. You read all these books about it, but yet it's hardly even brought up that communists killed what 10 times as many people as the Nazis did in the 20th century. Like it's hardly even brought up. So again, I just trying to use that as an example. Not only that, there's historical events that we like clearly ignore the cause and effect and the take-home lesson of historical events. Namely like the American Revolution, War of 1812, all that kind of stuff. We don't even talk about the main reasons that cause those kind of things, all that kind of stuff. Now, that's largely the Dunning-Kruger effect and in action. Now, the thing to bring up is that the public schools, I think, do a good job in a way and a bad job in a way. And a good job in a way in that the system is clearly designed to, at least a good job from their perspective, is clearly designed to give people the aura and the false truth or the false idea that they're quote unquote educated, all the while they're about as uneducated as you can possibly be. And the only thing you need to bring up to prove this, I mean, one of the main thing at least, is that take the average person coming out of high school. You have and bring this up. The left constantly brings up about how we need a $15 an hour minimum wage, and the places that have it, it's we need a $20 an hour minimum wage. Now, what no one ever brings up is that you go to school for 13 years, all of it controlled by the government, and you come out of that 13 years of education and you're not even valuable enough to earn $15 an hour. Again, that's all the evidence you need to go to show that public schools are absolutely terrible. They do not educate us. and they clearly mislead people at the very least, if not flat out brainwash them. So that again, that's something I wanted to bring up is that again, and that, like I said, that's the Dunning Kruger effect in reality is that public schools pretend to teach people, giving them the aura or the false sense that they're educated when in reality they're not. Um, and like I say, all the evidence you need to point that out is just how invaluable people are coming out of school. And I mean, I know this in my personal, like most of the jobs that I've ever got hired for are jobs that I got hired for other than the fact that I have a college education. In fact, I don't know if any other, especially the ones that have, got me better than minimum wage. Again, I'm still very young, but people, I mean, anybody who hires you for a job where you don't technically need an education because you have an education is someone you probably don't have to work for, because they're people that trust pieces of paper more than they trust their brain and critical thinking skills, all that kind of stuff. Like if you really know what you're talking about, you should be able to have a 5 minute conversation with someone and know if you should hire them or not without even having to look at a resume most of the time. Some people are very good at, manipulating people and coming off as, very good and whatnot. But most people, if you're someone, especially someone who's hired people before, if you're, someone who's been hiring people for a while, you know pretty much immediately. And I've had people tell me this. So yeah, but basically, to bring it full circle, the reason why I wanted to make a video on this is that most people don't understand this kind of stuff. Now, again, maybe it's not politics, maybe it's, I don't know what it is, but think of a topic or a field, whatever, that you know a lot about. Maybe you have a university or college education in it. Maybe you have an apprenticeship, whatever. Maybe it's a hobby that you do. And when you talk to the average person about it, the average person generally almost always comes off as thinking they know a lot more than they actually know. Like I see this all the time, and again, people say this all the time too. It's just weird they don't seem to recognize it. And that, like I say, that one topic that you know a lot about, and the other person knows hardly anything, if anything, but maybe they watched a YouTube video on it, or they heard a friend talk about it for 5 minutes, and they think they're an expert on it all of a sudden. So basically, that's what I wanted to talk about today. The Dunning Kruger effect, again, it's something that people really need to take note of, because again, it's natural too. Like I think people are, they're not consciously being like, hey, I'm gonna fall into the Dunning Kruger effect. Like no, it's something that naturally happens. But again, it's something that we should be talking about, and it's something that should be taught in schools and universities. That maybe when people are in conversation with people, they pick up, hey, maybe I don't know as much about this topic as I think I do. And again, it's a clear sign of someone who really is good at this kind of stuff is if they have doubt. Like for me, I constantly have doubt. Like I constantly have doubt about most of the things that I advocate for. Um, and that, again, that's an example of someone who really is someone who's at on the good end of the Dunning-Kruger effect, and that they don't fall into it. And another very good way of figuring out if someone is someone who falls for this and is someone who's at the bad end of this is that if you bring up a topic that they don't that you know about and they don't really know about, and they don't really know about, and that especially during a debate, if the first thing they do in the debate is try and figure out what you mean and why you believe in your argument, if that's the first thing they do, then you can tell that they have good intentions. Now, if people try and debate you on things they clearly don't know what they're talking about, again, gun control is probably the best example of this, especially during a time like this, the stuff that happened last week. Is like I say, you have these people that literally don't even know what an assault rifle is. They don't even know what it takes to get a gun legally in Canada. They don't know the difference between any of the classifications of guns. They literally know nothing, but yet they're perfectly sure that this thing that they're advocating for is going to stop shootings. Like seriously, like imagine if someone died in a drunk driving accident and they were under 18 and they killed someone, and like, you know what the answer is? Let's ban alcohol for people under 18. and you would, and let's say I just did it with a completely straight face and I actually believed it, you'd look at me and be like, you are the dumbest person alive, because obviously it's, at least in Alberta and most provinces, I think there's two or three where it's 19, but um, it's illegal for people under 18, especially while driving. So again, it's the same thing with gun controls. You have these people that they're advocating for, most of the things they're advocating for already exist, and inevitably they figure that out at some point. Like someone in the comments section will set them straight, and they'll be like, "Okay, let's just ban all guns," and so it's very funny to watch. But anyway, I'm gonna leave the video there. Again, I wanted to make a video about this because it's something that comes up a lot when you're debating people and when you're talking with people. So anyway, if you like the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. Again, obviously for e-transfer. I appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe. And last thing, as always, check out my BitChute channel as well.